So this is going to be an overview of the Biodiversity and Human Impact Project, and this is going to be what you're going to do instead of taking a test on biodiversity. So throughout the past few weeks, we've learned about biodiversity, specifically what it is, so different kinds of plants and animals in a habitat, and why it's so important. Well, it makes ecosystems stable and healthy, and one example is that it can actually prevent the spread of disease among specific species because those species in that area are more spread out when there are more different kinds of plants and animals in an area. We've also taken a look at the various ways human activity can negatively impact biodiversity. Your project is either going to be a public service announcement or a written letter to an elected official. You need to be able to communicate to the public in an informed way a solution that should be put in place to reduce human impact on biodiversity. The project will be broken down into 5 parts that we will complete between now and right before Thanksgiving break. The overall goal of this project is to design, evaluate, and refine a solution for reducing the impacts of human activities on the environment and biodiversity. First question: how have human activities and choices impacted biodiversity? Consider the 5 major biomes. The 5 major biomes are forest, aquatic, desert, tundra, and grassland. So go ahead and pause this video and write down ways that human activities and choices have impacted biodiversity. Specifically, think back to the Breaking Boundaries video we watched on Netflix. So go ahead and pause now. Now that we have some ideas of what human impacts on biodiversity are, before we actually do any research, we need to make sure we're ready to spot credible sources. So please go into Google Classroom, Classwork, Unit 2.0 Biodiversity and Human Impact Project, and open up Evaluation of Credibility of Sources. So here I am in the Google Classroom. You want to be in the Classwork section, and you want to be in the Unit 2.0 Biodiversity and Human Impact Project. And then you want to open up Evaluation of Credibility of Sources. So go ahead and open up this doc. You're going to want to make yourself a copy of this so that you can edit it. Pacific Northwest tree octopus. And I'm looking at this website, and I'm seeing they can be found in temperate rainforests of the Olympic Peninsula, so that's in Washington, on the west coast of North America. And I'm looking at their website. I'm looking at why they're endangered. Ways you can help. FAQs, sightings. Maybe we should check out some sightings. Well, not the greatest pictures here. There's one. Here's kind of one with like a Blair Witchy feel. Here's maybe a bird with one. Holding money. So the first few questions you can get from their website: describe the habitat, list 3 physical characteristics, and why is it endangered? And then go ahead and go to their help, their FAQs, and then sightings, and pick out at least one other interesting piece of information from each of those pages. Now, does anything, after you've done all that, does anything seem fishy about this organism? Check out the following video So go ahead and watch this video. You should watch the video. Go ahead and pause this. Now that you know, after you've watched the video, that this is fake, let's look at a method of determining what good information is and what information and sources based on the following criteria: currency, authority, relevance, and reliability, and purpose/slash point of view. Some people call this the crap test, but we're calling it the carp test. So, like a fish. Like, does anything seem fishy? So when we're looking at currency, we don't mean currency like money. We mean currency like time. Like, is it current? When was the information published or posted? So remember, we were watching the movie Breaking Boundaries, and I told you it was um, put out on June 4th, 2021. That makes it really, really current. Has the information been revised or updated? When? So even if it's not current, if they have updates, that is okay too, because in science, whenever we learn more, we're always updating with the new information. Um, is it a topic though that could use older things? So, like for example, if you're talking about ice age history and you're talking about ice core data, it's okay if it's old because we're talking about things that happened potentially millions of years ago. Websites, are those links actually functional? So make sure they actually go to a place. Like, what if it goes somewhere and it's like error 404 not found? Does that make your site less credible? Sometimes not, sometimes yes. So it's kind of you got to kind of pay attention. And if on any of these you're like unsure, just ask me and we can look at it together. The next one is authority. So who is the author? Who made it up? Are they a credible source? Are they a credible source for this information? So maybe they're a scientist, but like, what if they are a geologist and you're looking at them writing about an endangered species? Maybe a geologist isn't the best person to be talking about biology because that's not their specialty. Just because they're a scientist doesn't mean they're an expert on all different kinds of science, because there are lots of different kinds of sciences. Let's look at the next section: relevance and reliability. So, does the information relate to your topic? Is it relevant? Is it at an appropriate level for your research? If you're reading something written by a professor that has a lot of technical information, that might be too much for you. Maybe you need to find something that's written by a scientist that was meant to be read by the public. Who's the intended audience? So are they writing it for people that are already skeptical? They might have a bias. Or are they writing it just to communicate the information because they really want to get that information out there? Now, pretty much all writing is going to have some form of bias because humans are just a little bit biased. But it's important to know who and what they're biased about so you can take that information and be like, okay, I see. Maybe I need to look at another source to see, does that other source match up with it? And that's part of the reliability. Purpose and point of view. So, um, what is the information meant to do to the reader? Is it supposed to teach them? Is it supposed to sell them? Is it supposed to entertain them? Is it supposed to persuade them? Maybe if it's supposed to entertain or persuade, it might be a little bit like beyond what the scope of the information is that you can actually distill from that. Is the information fact or opinion? Is it propaganda? What does propaganda mean? Well, that's like persuasive writing, essentially. Does the point of view seem objective and impartial? Well, you're probably not going to get anything that's fully perfectly impartial unless there's a lot of data. So, one thing you can look for is if the person is not an expert on it, that doesn't mean that you necessarily have to not trust them. It's more like, okay, let's see, are they quoting actual data and are they putting links back to that data so then I can go look at that research and see, yep, okay, this checks out. If you look at the URL, let's talk about those. So we have .coms, .edu, .gov, and .org. So a lot of students know .edu and .govs are pretty good sources of information. One of the biggest misconceptions I encounter with students doing research is they think .org means it's automatically a reputable source, but all .org means is it's a not-for-profit organization. So that could be anything from the healthcare company Kaiser Permanente to a church. And so you got to think about who is behind that .org. It doesn't mean all .orgs are untrustworthy. It just means consider your source. So this is all information from the northwest.edu. So can we trust them? I think we can, because .edu has to be vetted. It has to be truthful. It has to be as objective as we can. So that's a way to look at is information. So go ahead now and use the CARP method from the video above and the checklist below that I just went through to critique each of the following websites. So you're essentially going to say, are they current? Who's the authority? Are they reliable? What's the purpose? And you're going to do that for these two. You need to also make sure you complete these following up questions. So there's 2 questions here. 3, sorry. There are 3 questions. And then you're done with that and ready to move on to